It was a Tuesday morning when the first letter arrived, folded too neatly, printed in that soulless font only HOA boards seemed to love. My grandma, Evelyn Hart, found it tucked under her front door mat. No stamp, no signature, just a logo stamped at the top, Maplebrook Estates Homeowners Association. She lived at the edge of Maplebrook for over 40 years, long before the HOA ever existed. Her land used to be the apple orchard the whole town visited every autumn. Developers had bought parcels of it over the decades, carving cul-de-sacs where her family once harvested fruit. But Grandma kept her last 5 acres, a stubborn green island surrounded by uniform beige houses. The letter claimed she was in violation of community standards. Specifically, unauthorized use of land not in compliance with HOA bylaws. Translation: Karen from the HOA board didn't like that Grandma still had a red barn and a weathered mailbox that didn't match the neighborhood's design harmony. Grandma chuckled when she read it. She assumed it was a mistake. But the next day, 2 suited compliance inspectors stood at her gate, clipboards in hand, snapping photos. And behind them stood Karen, blonde helmet of hair, too bright smile, the unofficial queen of Maplebrook. Karen wasted no time announcing, "Mrs. Hart, you're not technically grandfathered in. This property needs to meet HOA standards or face fines and eventual removal." Grandma just looked at her from the porch, one eyebrow raised. "Removal? You mean eviction? From my own land?" Karen's smile didn't budge. "The HOA has governing rights over this subdivision." That was the moment I saw the spark behind my grandma's calm eyes. She didn't argue, just invited them to leave and closed the barn-red door. But later that night, she called me. Her voice was firm. "They think they can erase history with photocopied bylaws," she said. "We'll play their game. And if you're into stories where quiet persistence trumps petty power, make sure you're subscribed. Because the way Grandma fights back from here? It's a masterclass in calm revenge." The harassment began in small ways. Anonymous complaints about unauthorized structures. HOA notices accusing her of improper fencing. Even absurd citations like excessive tree density. Each letter got more aggressive, each fee higher than the last. But Grandma wasn't alone. She kept every notice, time-stamped every visit, and set up security cameras. She'd learned from watching my late granddad handle property disputes. Paper trails were ammunition, and she wanted the full arsenal. When Karen tried to escalate to an official eviction warning, Grandma smiled wider than ever. "Evict me? On land my parents deeded before Maplebrook was dirt roads? Let's see if your bylaws trump my title deed." That's when I joined in. I scanned her old property documents, brittle and yellowed, dated 2 generations before the HOA was even founded. They clearly marked an exclusion clause. The Hart lot shall remain exempt from all subsidiary governance not expressly authorized by the Hart estate or its successors. In plain terms, the HOA had no authority over Grandma's land. None. Still, Karen wasn't done. She called a special session to vote on forcing compliance under community interest statutes. Her emails were slick, manipulative, presenting Grandma as a non-compliant member endangering property values. The absolute nerve of it. Grandma stayed classy. She baked cookies for the few friendly neighbors who still visited, waved to Karen every morning, and quietly installed one more security cam by the front gate. This one pointed directly at the HOA treasurer's nightly visits to her property line with a flashlight. She told me, "If they want a war, fine. I've got receipts older than their entire board." The tension simmered for weeks. Anonymous letters stuffed her mailbox. HOA meeting agendas included Mrs. Hart's violations as the opening item. Yet Karen hadn't realized she was building her whole campaign on a ticking legal time bomb. Because buried underneath Grandma's old deeds, under the signatures of 2 county commissioners from 1948, was a clause that wouldn't just stop an eviction. It would expose the entire HOA as operating beyond its jurisdiction. And Grandma had just found the perfect ally to prove it. Grandma always said paper tells more truth than people. And this time, the truth was hiding in a vault older than the HOA president's hair dye. We drove to the county registrar's office, a sandstone building that smelled like coffee, dust, and bureaucracy. The clerk, a man with reading glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger from the archives. He flipped through brittle pages until we found the Hart property deed. There it was, dated June 1948, complete with the seal of the town's first commissioner and a notarized condition in neat cursive. Said parcel is to remain exempt from future subdivision governance by any private association beyond its successor heirs. Translation: the land, and Grandma as its heir, was legally untouchable by the HOA. That discovery alone could have ended things. But Karen didn't believe facts applied to her. Within 2 days, Grandma received another final warning, sealed with the HOA letterhead, this time citing newly revised HOA Charter Authority. Karen had clearly called in reinforcements, probably her cousin's friend who passed a paralegal course online. So, it was time to escalate on our end. While Grandma handled the paperwork, I handled the modern weapons. A GPS tracker and a tiny AirTag discreetly placed inside the HOA's warning envelope, accidentally left at our door. When it got picked up the next morning by Karen's husband, I watched its location update in real time. Guess where it pinged? The HOA office, and then the county zoning department. She was digging, probably trying to find a loophole to claim the land somehow fell under HOA jurisdiction after a border realignment. Grandma wasn't just being bullied. This woman was actively trying to rewrite history. So, we decided on a new plan: document everything. Every car that slowed near Grandma's fence after midnight, captured on the new motion sensor cams. Every email Karen fired off about upcoming board votes, screenshot and timestamped. I even installed a small camera facing the HOA Dropbox, and sure enough, one evening we caught Karen sneaking out of her SUV, stuffing what looked like additional complaint letters into the box herself. It was golden evidence of tampering. But Grandma didn't want to pounce yet. The more rope she gives us, she said, the prettier the knot ties itself. Meanwhile, I found us an expert ally, an old friend who worked as a county property surveyor, Eddie Moreno. He was the type of man who could look at a fence post and tell you which decade it was planted in. He pulled up the digital boundary records on his tablet, zoomed in on the heartland, and smirked. Classic HOA reach, he said. Their boundary is 17 feet short of her fence. They have zero legal footing. Eddie filed an official survey report reaffirming Grandma's historic exemption status. But to make it court-worthy, we'd need an attorney, so we got one, a local legend, retired civil lawyer Patricia Greaves. White hair, sharp mind, cardigan that might as well have been armor. When she reviewed the documents, she laughed so hard her glasses fogged. "Oh, this is going to be fun," she said. Within a week, Grandma's porch had turned into a command center. Stacks of printed emails, photos, maps, and reports were neatly labeled in folders. Patricia helped her draft a cease and desist addressed directly to the HOA board, and she CC'd not only the county zoning office, but also the state real estate regulatory body. Grandma watched the printer spit out the last page. "That ought to make them sweat before breakfast," she said, sipping her tea. But Karen was relentless. Her pride outweighed her common sense. The HOA's next newsletter featured an entire section about maintaining cohesion through collective compliance, with a staged photo of Karen pointing toward Grandma's property line. It was practically a public declaration of war. What Karen didn't know was that our trap had already been set. The survey, the video evidence, the GPS logs, they all painted her as an overzealous HOA president breaching legal authority. One wrong move from her, and the board would implode under public scrutiny. The tension broke during that week's HOA meeting when Grandma, calm as ever, walked in wearing her Sunday best. Every seat turned toward her as Karen tried to keep her composure. Grandma laid her neat manila folder on the table and said, "Before you vote on anything, you might want to see what you've actually built your neighborhood on." Karen smirked. "I think we're done entertaining these dramatics, Mrs. Hart." Grandma smiled sweetly. "Oh, honey, we're just getting started." The room smelled like burnt coffee and arrogance. Folding chairs scraped against the community hall floor as neighbors murmured, half curious, half terrified that Karen might turn her wrath next on their hydrangeas. Grandma stood at the front, clutching her folders like a general before a siege. Karen tapped her manicured finger on the table. "Let the record show that the board finds Mrs. Hart's property in continued violation of." Grandma interrupted, her voice crisp and slow. "Before you get too deep into that sentence, Karen, you might want to read the legal notice your board ignored twice." From her bag, Grandma produced Patricia Greaves's cease and desist letter, stamped and notarized. She handed it to one of the board members. Poor guy looked like he'd rather be witnessing a tornado from inside a cardboard box. Patricia herself stood near the back, arms folded, observing like a hawk. When Karen tried to keep reading over Grandma, Patricia's calm voice cut through. Any further board action tonight against Mrs. Hart may constitute willful harassment under State Property Code Section 146. If that happens, I'll personally file a suit for damages by morning. Dead. Silence. Karen stumbled for a response, but the other board members had already started opening the attached documents. Boundary surveys, historic deed scans, time-stamped emails. The exhibit list read like a crime novel with Karen as the main character. Then Grandma hit play on a small speaker. The audio from one of her cameras filled the room, the HOA treasurer's voice whispering beside Karen. No one needs to know she's outside our jurisdiction. Just file it under compliance. Every face in the crowd turned toward them. That audio, Patricia said smoothly, was captured on Mrs. Hart's property with visible posting, and with full county approval to record incidents of suspected trespassing. It's admissible. Karen's face flushed purple. This is all a setup. Grandma tilted her head. If you mean documenting crimes against me, then yes, meticulously. Eddie, the surveyor, stepped forward and placed a rolled-up map on the table, flattening it with a satisfying thud. As confirmed by the county registry, the Hart parcel predates your HOA by 43 years. You have no governance past this red line. The red line stopped 17 feet short of the fence, right where they'd been citing her for noncompliance. The audience gasped. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. One of the newer residents, a quiet man named Daryl, stood up holding his phone. I did some digging after Mrs. Hart showed me the old deeds, he said. Turns out, based on the original transfer records, the HOA's entire clubhouse lot sits partially on her land. The room went quiet enough to hear fluorescent lights buzzing. That small strip of land, roughly 10 by 30 feet, technically still listed under the Hart estate, ran directly beneath the building's back patio. Overnight, the power dynamic flipped. Grandma wasn't the rule breaker anymore. She was the landowner that the HOA had accidentally been trespassing on for 14 years. Patricia nodded, calm and satisfied. Which means any association income derived from events held on that parcel could be subject to retroactive rent or restitution. Possibly tens of thousands of dollars. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. The rest of the board looked ready to resign en masse. You could see it, the entire house of cards collapsing under the weight of one fiercely polite grandma and her army of facts. Grandma gathered her papers, gave Karen the warmest, most withering smile in history, and said, "Now, about that eviction you mentioned, I'll consider letting you continue using my land if your board agrees to formally release jurisdiction and issue a written apology." By the next afternoon, an HOA representative dropped off a letter, short, shaky, and apologetic. They even offered to plant a commemorative tree in recognition of the Hart family's historical contribution to Maplebrook Estates. Grandma accepted. She chose an apple tree. Naturally, in the weeks that followed, Karen quietly resigned for personal reasons. The HOA revised all its boundary maps and governance statements. And every new homeowner learned the same priceless lesson, that you don't mess with the woman who still owns the ground you're standing on. Grandma told me later, it's not revenge when you're just reminding folks who planted the roots. She kept the eviction letter framed above her fireplace as a trophy. And every autumn, that apple tree in the HOA park blooms first, a small, sweet reminder that truth grows stronger when you don't let bullies prune it away.